The following program, The Russ Belville Show, is intended for responsible adults only. We advocate to the repeal of marijuana prohibition for adults. We discuss the science, culture, and controversy about America's marijuana laws. We do not advocate any illegal activity and encourage all listeners to learn their state and federal marijuana laws. Opinions and claims made by guests and advertisers on The Russ Belville Show are their own, and The Russ Belville Show cannot be held legally responsible for their validity or reliability. Viewer discretion is advised.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the continent to bring you the truth about cannabis and marijuana law reform.
I smoke pot and I like it a lot.
From the promise of legalization.
And I think that we think it can criminalize our marijuana laws.
To the agony of prohibition.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
The Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
Yeah, I hear you had a question for me.
Now, here's your host, Radical Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes, and welcome to the show. It is Wednesday, February 5th, 2014, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. We got so much great stuff to get to, but before I forget, we are still running our Fan Friday Trivia Contest. You could win this May 1975 edition of High Times Magazine, complete with the Coca Tasters Tour of Peru from Andrew Weil and a centerfold of the Starship Enterprise joint from 1975. You can be a winner. You just got to email the correct answer to our trivia question. We will give you that trivia question at the top of the next hour. So stay tuned. I know I'm a tease, but stay tuned and we'll tell you how you can win that High Times magazine. All right. On today's show, all sorts of great stuff. Oh my God. If you guys saw the testimony at the House committee the other day with Deputy Drug Czar Botticelli being grilled by the congressman there with respect to what they're calling the schizophrenia of the Obama marijuana policy. On the one hand, the president says it's safer than alcohol. On the other hand, his DEA and drug czar say it's as dangerous as heroin. Well, we're going to bring to you the best of the testimony. I've got Representative Earl Blumenauer, my congressional representative from here in Portland, Oregon, and Representative Steve Cohen from Tennessee, their opening statements and their cross-examination and questioning of drug czar Botticelli. It's just amazing. I'm going to show you the whole thing. It'll take the whole half hour, the second half hour. I'm just going to leave rant time to them because they did it far better than I could do it, let me tell you. But I got to say, it's pretty satisfying to hear congressmen in the United States Congress saying things about marijuana that I was writing on protest signs 10 years ago. So we are definitely making progress. But we will have time for a behind the headlines today. We're going to go and take a look at Alaska, which became eligible to vote for marijuana legalization come this August. We'll tell you how and why and give you a little background on the history of Alaskan legalization. Also, Gordon Green will be calling in to give us a little bit of our Music Planet Irie Wednesday Daily Toker tunes. We got a great tune today from Manu Chao, so I hope you really enjoy that. Stick around. In an hour or two, we'll talk more about the news of the day and, of course, get you up to date on the trivia contest. It's the Russ Belville Show here on 420radio.org, the serious source for weekday marijuana news. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for supporting us. Visit 420radio.org today.
We'll be right back after these messages from our 420 friendly sponsors. Support these advertisers because their ad money goes straight to the Russ Belville Show. You're tuned into the Russ Belville Show, the voice of the marijuana nation.
The law offices of Omar Figueroa would like to remind you to stand up for your rights. Please do not give up your precious liberties.
There's nothing wrong with standing up for our constitutional rights, and in fact, it's the best way to honor the Constitution that recognizes our natural rights. Treat law enforcement with respect and respect the Constitution by standing up for your rights. If you are detained or arrested, stand up for your rights by repeating, "I respectfully invoke all of my legal and constitutional rights. I do not consent to any search and seizure. I want to remain silent, and I want to speak with my attorney, Omar Figueroa." Omar Figueroa has more than a decade of experience in federal and California courts and graduated from Yale University, Stanford Law School, and Trial Lawyers College. Please contact the law offices of Omar Figueroa at 415-489-0420 or 707-829-0215 or on the web at omarfigueroa.com. 420 Radio, the world's voice of marijuana legalization. Cannabis Outreach Collective is an alternative health and wellness option located in Gladstone, Oregon, that serves patients in the Portland area and beyond. We are a full-service alternative health and wellness collective accommodating patients with natural, organic, holistic, and homeopathic remedies, nutritional guidance, advice, education, and medical cannabis, fully in accordance with Oregon OMMP law. You can find out more about Cannabis Outreach Collective on Facebook at COC503 or by emailing cannabisoutreachcollective503@gmail.com or by telephone at 503-853-1319. Check out our menu on Weed Maps and visit Cannabis Outreach Collective today. This is your 420 Radio News for Wednesday, February 5th, 2014, brought to you by National Cannabis Coalition. I'm Russ Belville. Alaska will be the next state to vote on legalizing marijuana. The Alaska Secretary of State's office has certified that over 30,000 valid signatures from 30 of 40 House districts have been collected to put a marijuana legalization initiative on the August 19 primary ballot. The Alaska initiative mirrors much of the legalization in Colorado. Adults over 21 could possess an ounce of marijuana and grow 3 mature and 3 immature plants. Giving marijuana and plants to other adults for no remuneration will be legal as well, but public consumption will get you a $100 fine. A marijuana market will be established with producers, processors, and retailers. However, localities will be able to ban marijuana businesses. Taxes will be capped at $50 per ounce. The initiative specifically protects Alaska's constitutional right to privacy for adults over 18 to possess up to 4 ounces of marijuana and cultivate up to 25 cannabis plants in the home. The passage of the federal Farm Bill means states that have legalized industrial hemp may begin planting seeds in the spring. The omnibus bill, covering various aspects of U.S. farm policy, contained within it a small amendment by Representatives Jared Polis, Thomas Massey, and Earl Blumenauer that allows for research on industrial hemp by universities and state agriculture departments in those states that have already legalized hemp at the state level. 10 states, California, Colorado, Kentucky, Maine, Montana, North Dakota, Oregon, Vermont, Washington, and West Virginia, have such laws authorizing hemp production. While this is a step short of allowing full-scale commercial hemp farming, Representative Polis noted, quote, "This is a step in the right direction toward utilizing this crop in a way that improves our economy and creates jobs," end quote. The United States Congressional Research Service notes that America is the only developed nation that fails to utilize hemp as an industrial crop. The Washington, D.C. City Council has voted almost unanimously to decriminalize marijuana possession. The 11-1 vote of the council would lower the punishment for possession of up to an ounce of pot to just a civil fine rather than criminal charges. The measure faces a second vote, which, given the first vote results, seems a mere formality. The measure is supported by the mayor, Vincent Gray, but may face opposition from the U.S. Congress, which has ultimate authority over the operation of the federal district. Medical marijuana was passed by district voters in 1998, but congressional interference delayed implementation of the law until 2010, and even today there is but one medical marijuana dispensary and only a handful of registered patients. Supporters of the decriminalization measure point to the vastly disproportionate arrests of African Americans, the majority race in Washington, compared to white people for marijuana use. CNBC focuses on refugee families fleeing their home states for marijuana-friendly states. In a story published today, CNBC's Kelly Grant explained how people are suddenly uprooting their lives and moving to Colorado and other medical states for treatment. CNBC interviewed Lindsay Reinhart, director of Undergreen Railroad, a volunteer service that helps marijuana refugees move. She said, quote, "As soon as we have the intake form up, we're swamped with requests," end quote, and that they've helped four families move, not including her own from Idaho to Oregon, with 6 more families in transit. Another activist refugee, Diane Fornbacher, publisher of Ladybud magazine, explained how her PTSD doesn't qualify her for medical marijuana use in her home state of New Jersey, so she's moved to Colorado, where the recreational law allows her to use marijuana. Canadian pop singer Justin Bieber was smoking so much marijuana on his private jet, the pilots donned oxygen masks for fear secondhand pot smoke would cause them to fail subsequent drug testing. The flight attendant claimed she was verbally harassed by Bieber, his father Jeremy, and an entourage of 10 friends, to the point where she took refuge in the cockpit with the pilots. DEA and customs officials met Bieber's plane at the Teterboro, New Jersey airport and claimed marijuana smoke was still present in the cabin. Drug dogs alerted to the scent of marijuana, but a search found no contraband. The flight crew declined to press any charges against Bieber, and with the lack of physical evidence found, the teenage crooner was allowed to go attend the Super Bowl. This is Bieber's third encounter with law enforcement in 3 months. In December, he was arrested for assault on a limo driver in Toronto, Canada, and in January, he was arrested in Miami for drag racing while drunk. This has been your 420 Radio News for Wednesday, February 5th, 2014. I'm Russ Belville. Transcripts of 420 Radio News are available exclusively at the National Cannabis Coalition. Visit ncc420.com to download now. When we come back, we'll go behind the headlines and take another look at Alaska's legalization effort that is going to the ballot this August, and a little history on the legalization of marijuana in Alaska. You're listening to The Russ Belville Show on 420radio.org. We'll be right back. When you are starting up a medical cannabis business, you don't just want any attorney. You want a fired-up lawyer who understands the needs of cannabis consumers. The law office of Lauren Vasquez is your fired-up lawyer for the cannabis industry. Lauren Vasquez knows the details of California marijuana law from both a personal and professional angle. Lauren Vasquez rose from the ranks of college normal activist to become one of the Bay Area's best marijuana lawyers. Visit her website, fireduplawyer.com, or call 1-855-MMJ-LAWS for more information. That's 855-665-5297 for Lauren Vasquez, your fired-up lawyer, or email firedupLawyer@gmail.com. The number again is 855-MMJ-LAWS, 855-665-5297 for your fired-up lawyer, Lauren Vasquez. Lauren Vasquez is an activist attorney you can trust. Call today.
I'm Sub Cool from Team Green Avenger. At TGAgenetics.com, we are working on the leading edge of medical strains. Our strains are rigorously tested for THC, CBD, THCV, and other critical cannabinoids. Know your grow. Check out our genetic diversity at TGAgenetics.com, the home of Jelly Bean, Jack the Ripper, Vortex, and other award-winning cannabis strains.
Hemp Beach TV with Blazy and Max from the Secret Hemp Beach. Every Friday at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. GMT on 420radio.org. Welcome back, everyone. Time for us to go behind the headlines on Alaska, which will be the next state to vote on legal weed. As we told you in the news, they collected over 30,000 signatures to put the Alaskan Marijuana Legalization Initiative on the August 19th primary ballot. And that's kind of weird, but Alaska is unique among the initiative states in that it places the language for initiatives on the primary ballots instead of the general election in November, which is kind of interesting from a political point of view. If you're trying to use initiatives to bring people out for a certain candidate, like they're doing, they allege in Florida that the medical marijuana there is being pushed to help the Democrat running for governor against the Republican who's against medical marijuana. You couldn't do that in Alaska because you'd only be messing with the primary. You wouldn't be messing with the general election. So maybe there is some wisdom to putting it on the primary ballot. All I know is it means Alaska is going to beat Oregon by about 5 months in marijuana legalization. Now, Tim Hinterberger, he's the chief petitioner for what's called the Campaign to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol in Alaska. They actually turned in more than 48,000 signatures, but their validity rate was about 79%, which is actually pretty good. Most of the times when you're trying to get signatures, you try to aim for 50% more than you really need. So you're looking to have, 133% to 150% of what you really need. And then when they cast out the ones that aren't valid voters, they can't find their address or whatever, you still have enough to make the ballot. So 79% is pretty good as far as initiative petitioning goes. Now, we told you what the initiative will cover. It's going to be like Colorado. If you're an adult 21 and over, you can possess an ounce. You can grow 3 mature plants. You can grow 3 immature plants for a total of 6. You could give marijuana to other adults. You could give plants to other adults. You can't sell them, but you can give them for what they call no remuneration. So nothing of value can be exchanged for marijuana. Public consumption is going to be illegal. It's going to be a $100 fine for public consumption. They will set up a marijuana market. They'll have processors and producers and retailers, somewhat like, what we've heard in the other states attempting this. But one of the bad things about this is they are going to allow local bans. Say Juneau or Sitka or Anchorage wants to ban marijuana businesses, they'll be able to do that. They won't be able to ban the possession. You'll still be able to possess, still be able to cultivate. But like in Colorado, where Colorado Springs, and some of these other cities have banned marijuana businesses, they'll be able to do so in Alaska as well. The tax situation's pretty nice, though. They're going to cap the taxes here at $50 an ounce. So that sounds pretty good to me. Alaska is kind of an interesting history, though, when you look at marijuana legalization, because in a sense, what they're proposing now, 1 ounce and 6 plants, is less than the right they already have. In 1975, there was this lawyer named Irwin Raven, and he got a speeding ticket. He purposely, drove too fast so that he'd get a speeding ticket, and he purposefully took with him a bag of weed so that when he get busted, he could challenge the state's prohibition on marijuana in court. So he did, and this went through the courts and the appeals and finally made it up to the Supreme Court, where the case was called Raven v. State. And the Supreme Court of Alaska decided that Alaska's constitutional right to privacy, which is one of the strongest constitutional rights to privacy of any of the state constitutions, and far stronger than the U.S. Constitution's right to privacy, that Alaska's constitutional right to privacy protects adults over the age of 18 for the possession of up to 4 ounces of marijuana, quarter pound, and cultivation of up to 25 cannabis plants in the home. Basically, they ruled that, we have a right to privacy in our homes, and that the danger from someone growing pot for their own personal use at home is outweighed by the right to privacy. So cops really can't, as long as you're keeping cool and you keep it in your house, cops really can't mess with you for up to a quarter pound. That was 1975. Now, more conservative people in Alaska did not like that. Alaska tends to be kind of a Republican state. And in 1990, when the drug war was all hyped up, drug czar Bill Bennett helped activists get a recriminalization measure on the ballot. And that passed with 54% of the vote. So from 75 to 90, you could have up to a quarter pound. After 1990, it was illegal again. Then in 2000, a decade later, they pro-pot people put Alaska Marijuana Decrim Initiative on the ballot to go back to the way it was with Raven, and that failed. It only got 41% of the vote. So marijuana was still illegal. Then in 2003, the Alaska Court of Appeals, in a case called Noy versus State, ruled that a voter initiative cannot criminalize a constitutionally protected right. So the 1990 Recrim initiative could not put a punishment on the right that the 1975 court said Alaskans had. And so then everyone got their quarter pound and 25 plants back. In 2004, Alaska tried to legalize again with the Alaska Legalized Marijuana Act, but it failed, 44% of the vote. And in 2006, the legislature voted once again, this time to make it criminal for anything over an ounce. And that yet hasn't been challenged in court. So we don't know really if Alaskans have a 4-ounce right or a 1-ounce right. But one thing we do know is in this new legalization vote, they make it very clear that this legalization does not change citizens' rights under Raven. We'll keep you posted on how this all turns out.
Oh, have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. Have you ever met that funny reefer man? A reefer man. If he said he swam to China, he would sell you South Carolina. Then you know you're talking to that reefer man.
Marijuana, do you wanna? Mary, do you wanna? Tonight.
As marijuana goes mainstream, you need to be armed with the facts. Nobody can teach you better than Dr. Mitch Earlywine, Ph.D. You may know Dr. Mitch from his column in High Times magazine or his weekly appearance on the Russ Belville Show. Dr. Mitch is also the author of some of the best books on marijuana science, culture, history, and health, including Understanding Marijuana, Parents' Guide to Marijuana, Pot Politics, and more. Visit Amazon.com and search for Mitch Earlywine, that's EARLEYWINE, and order your books today. You can also contact Dr. Mitch by email at 420research@gmail.com.
On an all-new intervention.
Mark, welcome home. Please come, join us.
Mark hasn't smoked weed in about 10 days, and I'm worried about him. I can't watch him destroy himself.
I'm fine, okay? This is none of your business.
Shh. Come, Mark. We're only here because we care.
I'm in control. That's what they don't get, is that I can start smoking weed anytime that I want to. I just don't feel like it right now.
At first he was, just skipping a day here and there. But then it got more and more consistent, and then he just wasn't smoking any weed at all.
Mark, we haven't smoked a joint together in like 3 weeks, man. I don't know who you are anymore. Your short-term memory is incredible. I just can't sit back and watch someone destroy their own lives with horrible decisions.
See you guys. Stupid, I'm getting out of here.
Hey,
don't touch me!
It hurts me a lot, What do you do for someone that you care about that is ruining their own life? What do you do?
He's not showing any signs of starting.
Intervention on A&E.
Everyone knows music and marijuana go together, so let's wind up our 20 after break with the Russ Belville Show's Daily Toker Tunes, the best in pod-safe 420 music from around the web. Today is Irie Wednesday, featuring reggae, ska, and other world music genres. Now, sit back and enjoy your Daily Toker Tunes.
Welcome back, everyone. 24 after the hour, and we're joined by Gordon Green, who's calling into the show. How you doing, Gordon?
Doing great, Russ. How about yourself?
Oh, I'm so glad to have you here. And I told my Miami girlfriend that we'd be playing Manu Chao today, and she's delighted because she loves this artist. Why don't you tell us a bit about him?
Hey, man. Manu Chao is he was born in Paris. He had his claim to fame as a band called Mano Negro, which was like a Spanish-French punk band. They put out about 5 albums in the late 80s and 90s. And he went solo in late 90s, 98, traveled through South America recording different musicians and playing street festivals, busking, and recorded all this great material. Came back, cut this album called Clandestino, and gonna play the title track from that. It actually won, took a couple of years, but won the World Music Award for Best World Music Album, I think, in 2001, and sold over 5 million copies worldwide. He's not that well known in the USA. Starts getting down to Miami, he is, but spreading the word now.
Excellent. And we'll get more music just like this on Gordon Green's Music Planet. You can hear it Wednesdays at 11 a.m. and replays, a couple of replays throughout the week. And what do you have on this week's Planet?
Well, actually, earlier today I played a different track from Clandestino called Welcome to Tijuana. And that always gets people moving. I've got some stuff from Pakistan, Nusrat Ali Khan. I've got another band from Mexico, political band called Molotov. Got some young French singer named Zaz, and it's a really nice show.
All right, we're looking forward to that. We'll be paying attention. Let's get to the music. This is Manu Chao with Clandestino.
Solo voy con mi pena, sola va mi condena. Correré mi destino para burlar la ley, perdido en el corazón de la grande Babilón. Me dicen el clandestino por no llevar papel. Pa' una ciudad del norte yo me fui a trabajar. Mi vida la dejé entre Ceuta y Gibraltar. Soy una raya en el mar, fantasma en la ciudad. Mi vida va prohibida, dice la autoridad. Solo voy con mi pena, sola va mi condena. Correré mi destino por no llevar papel, perdido en el corazón de la grande Babilón. Me dicen el clandestino, yo soy el quebra ley. Mano negra clandestina, peruano clandestino, africano clandestino, marihuana ilegal. Solo voy con mi pena, sola va mi condena. Correré mi destino para burlar la ley, perdido en el corazón de la grande Babilón. Me dicen el clandestino por no llevar papel. Argelino clandestino, nigeriano clandestino, boliviano clandestino, mano negra ilegal.
شوف الله يخليك اذا ما تسالي اذا ما تدوز الصبح شوف داك السيمون في النمو الشمال ديال الكرفان ولا راه شي ناس يمشيو لموريتانيا ويجي معاهم باش يجازين راه غادي يعطيو واحد هذا واحد.
Reforming America's prohibition laws cannot happen without relentlessly and directly engaging our lawmakers and other elected officials. The Russ Belville Show keeps you on top of all the latest developments at the federal, state, and local level with our government at work.
Welcome back, everyone, and we're going to bring you full coverage of Representative Earl Blumenauer and Steve Cohen tearing apart the Deputy Drug Czar, Mr. Botticelli, in Congress yesterday. Enjoy.
I yield back. Thank you, and we'll now hear from Mr. Blumenauer, the gentleman from Oregon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the committee's courtesy in permitting me to join with you in this, and I think it is a timely and important hearing. I agree with the chair that the federal government is not necessarily coordinated on this. I agree that the committee has a responsibility to deal with the use of federal dollars, and I think you referenced $25 billion spent on drug enforcement overall. And I certainly agree wholeheartedly with the dangers of adolescent use of marijuana. I think the question before us that we might be able to explore today, and I hope we're able, under your leadership, to move further, is just how best are we going to address those issues. We have been engaged in an experiment of over 40 years of prohibition of marijuana, which has failed spectacularly. 50 million people use it annually. About half the American public, adult population, has used it. As a couple of my colleagues have referenced, a majority of Americans now think it should be legal. And if you ask that question differently, if you say, should the federal government respect the decisions of the states, like we do with alcohol, that percentage goes up even higher. Mr. Chairman, I noted last week in your state, almost 700,000 signatures were delivered that will require a vote in the fall on Florida becoming the first southern state to approve medical marijuana. And recent surveys indicate about 2/3 of the population now says they support it, and I've seen one survey that's much higher than that. We've talked about the costs. I think if we shift from a prohibition, enforcement, incarcerate, and instead deal to tax and regulate, it's going to mean probably conservatively $100 billion of public dollars available over the next 10 years. It is outrageous that 8 million people have been arrested in the last decade, and as several of my colleagues have mentioned, it is outrageous that African American youth, primarily young men, are almost 4 times as likely to be arrested as white youth, even though, in fact, there's evidence that the white youth use marijuana as much or more than African American. And I think it was Mr. Cummings who referenced some of the disparities in different regions. There's some areas in Louisiana where that disparity is 11 times greater for African American youth. And I do think the administration needs to think through what a comprehensive approach should be. The President has acknowledged what most Americans know. Marijuana is, well, frankly, not as dangerous to your health as tobacco. It's not as addictive. Congress is also out of touch, I would suggest, because Congress established these schedules that you referenced in your opening statement. According to what we have in statute, marijuana is Schedule 1, which puts it on a par with LSD and heroin, has no medicinal properties, and is more dangerous than coke and methamphetamines. And I don't think you will find any sheriff, any district attorney, or any health expert who would remotely suggest that that is true. We are in a situation now where there is nobody who checks the identification of an adolescent. They're not asked to prove their age. There's no license that a drug dealer loses. Mr. Conley's comments about the progress that we've made with tobacco, which is highly addictive and still kills hundreds of thousands of people a year, is significant. And I am hopeful that with this committee's leadership, we can look at how maybe we rationalize this, that we don't interfere with the states, where 146 million people live where it's perfectly legal to buy marijuana under state laws, most of it according to votes of the people. And there are little things that we can do to fix anomalies. Federal law forces legitimate marijuana businesses to be entirely cash. They can't get a bank account, and delivering their tax payments with shopping bags full of cash, if you care about money laundering, if you care about tax evasion and theft, is crazy. It's just crazy. And we tax these legally authorized under state and local law businesses 2 and 3 times more heavily than we treat other businesses. I know Mr. Norquist, Grover Norquist, joined me in a press conference on legislation I have to fix that. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your dealing with this issue. I appreciate your courtesy in allowing me to be with you, and I hope you can help shine a light and we can have this important conversation.
Representative Earl Blumenauer, Democrat from Oregon. Following up now, Democrat from Tennessee, Steve Cohen will be speaking.
And I had heard the president say that Congress had to resolve this matter. The staff in their briefings to me said that actually they have the authority to change that without Congress. Absolutely. So that's something I want to get into with Mr. Botticelli and where they intend to go on this. But some good points. And let me yield now to gentlemen also not part of the panel, but came to the hearing. Thank you, Mr. Cohen from Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. Micah. First, I want to thank you for allowing me to participate. I enjoyed serving under you on Transportation Committee. And secondly, I'd like to incorporate by reference all of the things that have been said that are politically correct on this issue as if I said them. And basically, I agree with most of them. And I want to thank the President. I don't think the President has been schizophrenic. The President hasn't gone nearly as far as I would like to see him go on this issue because it's a freedom issue. But the President has gone somewhat in enlightening the public as to priorities and as to Louis Brandeis and the laboratories of democracy, and we're on the right path. I would submit, with all due respect to my fellows on the other side, that schizophrenia, which my father was a psychiatrist and taught me something about, could be described as a party that talks about saving money all the time and being concerned with deficits and being totally driven by that, but not being concerned in saving money when people are in jail for marijuana and mandatory minimums that judges have said were awful, and for nonviolent first-time offenders who are serving lifetime sentences in jail, costing us $30,000 a year, and the population of jails has gone up 800% in the last 30 years. That's schizophrenia. You're concerned about cost and cutting costs, but not when it's jailing a population. I think it's schizophrenia when you're all for state issues and preemption and priorities and giving power back to the states, but not when it comes to them passing laws concerning marijuana. Then you're not for state initiatives and state priorities. And I think there's a certain schizophrenia for a party that talks about civil liberties, but not when it comes to personal liberties on this subject. So sometimes politics make strange bedfellows, and whether they're in the same bin as McMurphy or not is another issue to be discussed. Mr. Botticelli, your hands are tied on Schedule 1, but it is ludicrous, absurd, crazy to have marijuana in the same level as heroin. Ask the late Philip Seymour Hoffman, if you could. Nobody dies from marijuana. People die from heroin. And every second that we spend in this country trying to enforce marijuana laws is a second that we're not enforcing heroin laws. And heroin and meth are the two drugs that are ravaging our country. And every death, including Mr. Hoffman's, is partly the responsibility of the federal government's drug priorities for not putting total emphasis on the drugs that kill, that cause people to be addicted and have to steal to support their habit. And heroin and meth is where all of your priorities should be. And it's not just Mr. Hoffman, a brilliant actor at 46 years of age, who first went to prescription drugs and then came back to heroin. That's our two major issues, I guess. I had a young friend, son of a girl I dated, who died of a heroin overdose about 2 years ago. I went to a party in Memphis recently, not Vermont, where the governor spent his entire State of the State hour address talking about the ravages of heroin in his state, but Memphis, Tennessee, where 4 women, give or take my age, well, maybe 15 years younger, sometimes I lose perspective, talked about heroin being a great problem among their children. and in the Memphis community, and about another young man who had died of heroin. Heroin is getting into the arms of young people. And when we put marijuana on the same level as heroin and LSD and meth and crack and cocaine, we are telling young people not to listen to the adults about the ravages and the problems, and they don't listen because they know you're wrong. Because as Mr. Micah said, we know a lot of young people smoke marijuana. They shouldn't. Young people should be being young people. The most precious commodity in the world is time. Young people have got lots of time. Mr. Mike and I don't have that much more time. That's just the realities. And when you're young, enjoy being young, playing ball, taking it easy, just doing kids' things and learning. And you shouldn't be doing drugs, but they are. And we need to be sure that we keep them alive. We need to educate them. But our efforts ought to be toward meth and heroin. That's where efforts should be. And it shouldn't be Schedule 1. Anybody that goes to jail for marijuana is a crime when people for possession are taking their liberties away. It's a waste of money. It's a waste of resources. It's a crime committed by our government. There is a cultural lag in this country, and this Congress is a leader in it. My time has expired. I thank the committee for allowing me to express myself. I will take questions.
You want to legalize it? Call your congressman today. 202-224-3121. It's free, it's easy, and you don't even have to give your name, just your zip code, and they'll hook you up to your congressman. Call 202-224-3121 and tell Congress you support marijuana legalization.
We're watching testimony on the House. I'm not sure which committee it is, but the Deputy Drug Czar Botticelli is being grilled by Representatives Blumenauer and Representatives Cohen, who just made their opening statements. Now they get to ask direct questions. This is where it gets really good. It's so nice to finally hear the truth in Washington, D.C.
Thank you, and let me yield now to Mr. Blumenauer.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate this, and I've found the conversation here to be very useful, and I think you're highlighting the wide range of issues that are on people's minds. I hope there's an opportunity to continue it. Mr. Botticelli, how many marijuana overdose deaths were there in the most recent year you have available?
To my knowledge, I don't know if there have been instances of specific overdose-related
deaths. You
deaths.
talked about marijuana deaths, and so I want to be clear. I'm trying to trap you.
No.
How many marijuana deaths have there been in the last 5 years?
So if you're referring to overdoses, I am not sure of those numbers. If you're referring to fatalities,
then I would like to have you supply us with how many overdose deaths there were, because I have heard from experts whose judgment I respect that they don't know of any. So that would be really important for you to provide, at least to me, if not to the committee. What is more dangerous and addictive, methamphetamines and cocaine or marijuana?
So, I don't think anyone would dispute the fact that there's relative toxicity related to those drugs.
But I'm afraid what's more dangerous and what is more addictive? Cocaine and meth or marijuana? Pretty simple.
I think that conversation minimizes the harm.
No, I'm not trying to minimize the harm. I want to know which is more dangerous and addictive.
Again, I go back as as a public health person. One of the things that we look at is not what's the relative risk of one drug.
Let me just say that I think that your equivocation right there, being unable to answer something clearly and definitively when there is unquestioned evidence to the contrary, is why young people don't believe the propaganda, why they think it's benign. If a professional like you cannot answer clearly that meth is more dangerous than marijuana, which every kid on the street knows, which every parent knows, if you can't answer that, maybe that's why we're failing to educate people about the dangers. I don't want kids smoking marijuana. I agree with the chairman. But if the deputy director of the Office of Drug Policy can't answer that question, how do you expect high school kids to take you seriously?
So, Representative, I didn't mean to be disrespectful, and I didn't mean to indicate that there is not different degrees of toxicity associated with different
I asked
drugs.
what was more dangerous. You couldn't answer it.
No.
And I just want to say that you, sir, represent what's part of the problem. Let me go a little further.
So, sorry, that's
Let's
exactly
talk
not
about
what I'm saying.
What kills more people, tobacco or marijuana?
There's been a fair amount of tobacco-associated deaths. My challenge, and the reason I'm hesitating about answering the questions as it relates to relative risk, is I think many times that conversation gets distorted, that there's no risk, that there's...
I'm not trying to trap you.
No. But this is why, Representative, I don't want to be disrespectful.
Let me suggest that your inability to answer me whether tobacco or marijuana is more dangerous, again, is part of the problem. Mr. Connolly documented very clearly that we have been able to drop dramatically tobacco use. And it kills more people than marijuana, if you don't know that. But we've been able to drop that without locking people up, without arresting. I think this administration has seen 3 to 4 million people arrested for marijuana since it's been in office. And yet we've been able to drop tobacco use without being coercive. We've been using fact-based advertising, and we've focused our efforts on things that matter rather than things that don't work. And I'd respectfully suggest that you and the department take a step back. If you're concerned that somehow people think marijuana is benign, that part of the reason is that drug professionals can't communicate in ways that the rest of America does. I appreciate your being here, and I welcome any written follow-up to my questions. Because I'm not trying to trap you, but I'm very discouraged by your inability to answer questions.
So let me tell you, this morning I spent the bulk of my morning with a number of parents from across the country who are doing everything they can do to prevent drug use, and particularly prescription drug use, and many of them whose kids have died of an overdose. And I asked them, what more can the federal government be doing in terms of preventing substance use and preventing the tragedies? And they told me they cannot understand why states are moving to medical marijuana and legal medical marijuana. They cannot understand it because they understand from a very acute level the message that legalization sends them. And these are, so this is not from a bureaucrat in Washington. These are from parents who struggle on a daily basis and have been devastated by addiction and their kids. And they understand in a very dramatic and real way that legalizing marijuana sends the absolute wrong message to our youth.
I thank the gentleman. We'll recognize Mr. Cohen from Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With all due respect, you should be listening to scientists. I understand the parents who are grieved because their child died of an overdose. They didn't overdose on marijuana. And you're listening to them rather than the scientists? Mr. Botticelli, it may go back to A Few Good Men, the movie, Jack Nicholson. You can't handle the truth. The truth is the drug war failed. Your direction on marijuana is a failure. Get to dealing and saving kids from heroin overdoses. My young 22-year-old friend died of a heroin overdose. Yeah, he smoked marijuana, probably the first thing he did. But that's not why he smoked heroin or shot it up. Maybe he did it because he heard people like you saying they're all bad and they're all terrible and you can't deal with the truth, and tell them, well, maybe marijuana doesn't kill you. Heroin does and meth does. They're different. And until you deal with the truth, the kids aren't going to believe you at all. Now, you talked about alcohol, and you may have gotten to this. Cirrhosis of the liver, pretty serious thing. Violence against spouses and women. People don't smoke marijuana and beat up their wives and girlfriends. They get drunk. Sometimes they beat up their wives and girlfriends. And I know you've got your statistics. I would debate your statistics. And if you get into your statistics about the amount of people who had marijuana in their system who were arrested or had fatal accidents, I would submit they probably had other drugs in their system, like cocaine or crack in addition to the marijuana, or they had alcohol and marijuana wasn't the cause. Because what I've understand is people who smoke marijuana, mostly they drive slower and they look out for the cops. They don't drive fast and wild like people do on alcohol and cause deaths. Maybe the reason there's so many more people smoking marijuana now is because they're not listening. And maybe they're doing the other drugs too. But it also shows that the drug war has been a failure. It's been a serious failure. Harry Anslinger started. You know who Harry Anslinger is, don't you?
I do not, unfortunately.
You never? Well, you should, because he's your great-grandfather. He started this war in the 30s, and he was tuned out too. And he did it to get the American public had problems, which sometimes I think we still got them, with Hispanics and Mexicans coming into this country. And it was a war on Hispanics and African Americans. And that's when they made marijuana illegal, was in the 30s. And it was all directed at those people. And Latinos are just as much discriminated against as African Americans in disparate arrests. It still continues to this day. It's 85 years since Anslinger started this. And it's the fact that we spent so much time arresting people is sinful. You talked about the overall effects of marijuana. Again, you can't name one person who's died from an overdose of marijuana, can you?
Not to my knowledge, sir.
Right. And you say the cumulative effects. Do you know people, possibly, or heard of people who smoke marijuana who are corporate giants, run banks, run major corporations? Do you know about these people?
Yes, sir, but I also know equal number of people. I know a substantial number of people who also have gone on to develop significant disorders who have smoked marijuana. Again, 1 in 9 people who try marijuana develop a dependency, and we know that particularly those kids who use it earlier in their
Kids shouldn't use it. Kids shouldn't use it ever. And at age 18, people shouldn't be arrested for it. Mm-hmm. Maybe it should be 21. But kids shouldn't use it. That's something we all agree on. But the fact is, we need to put our priorities toward heroin and meth. What percentage of your budget goes towards heroin addiction?
So I don't think we necessarily slice our budget, our demand reduction budget, based on drugs. Again, our prevention efforts are focused on preventing drug use.
Isn't that a mistake when people die from heroin in great numbers that the Vermont governor spends his entire state of the state on heroin use? And we don't distinguish and try to save people's lives? That's when you knock people over at the corner store. It's not to get money to buy a donut because you're high. It's to buy heroin because you're hooked. That causes people to die.
Our office in 2011, I think, acknowledged the burgeoning prescription drug and opiate epidemic that we have in the United States. In 2011, we released a plan that looks at dealing with the prescription drug abuse and opiate issues.
Let me ask you, my time's about to run out, and let me ask you one thing. I corresponded back in 2011 with I guess your predecessor, Kierliowski?
Kurlikowski. He's actually the current director now.
Is he? He said back then that there was no particular, they haven't found any medical use. To date, however, the FDA and the Institute of Medicine have not found smoked marijuana to be a safe or effective medicine for any condition, nor has any medical association come out in favor of smoked marijuana for widespread medical use. I think that medical associations have, but are you not aware of the fact that people use smoked marijuana to get them through cancer treatment, nausea?
I do, sir, and it's never been our office's position to either to arrest people who've been using medical marijuana. I think it's important for us, and again, unfortunately, that the FDA is not here. You know, that it's the FDA process that ultimately determines the scientific efficacy of a.
But couldn't you try to influence it? Shouldn't that be part of your job? I had a buddy who was a SEAL. He died of pancreatic cancer. So when he was he smoked marijuana at the end. His mother said it's the only thing that makes Oral smile or eat. So that was pretty good.
So our role in this is to rely on the FDA scientific process to determine. That's our influencing role, is to rely on the science. I would also say, and I find it unfortunate, and I think I would ask the chairman to invite Dr. Nora Volkow, who's the director of the National Institute on Drug Abuse, because that's where our policy and our science is derived from. We are a science-based office and a policy-based office. And I think if you listen to Dr. Volkow, who is not involved in a political discussion around substance use and marijuana, she will lay out for you the scientific evidence that.
Well, let me ask you this. You are prohibited by law from using any funds to study marijuana legalization for medicinal purposes or any other reason. You're the only office in the federal government that's restricted in that way, and you're required to oppose any scheduling of Schedule I substances, rescheduling like marijuana, that have been approved for medical purposes. Aren't you troubled by these constraints, and don't you think that your expertise should be allowed to be used and study science and contribute to a positive classification of drugs?
So I'm not familiar. Congress put that language in our reauthorization, and I'm actually not, I don't know the background of that.
Would you support legislation to allow you to participate and to voice your opinion and to use science as a basis for your determination?
Well, what I would do is support that federal agencies have the ability to do that. So
yours is prohibited by law. Should that restriction not be lifted?
Again, I think we'd have to have subsequent conversation in terms of...
You mean you think you should be muzzled?
I think that it's important that our office not involve itself in terms of given legislation or given activities. And I believe that that was the genesis for that language, that the office not involve itself in state.
But the totality of the drug world, you need to participate. And if you realize that medical marijuana, as 20 states have found, can help people with cancer, with nausea, with those, maybe glaucoma. I mean, Montel Williams apparently has some benefits from it. Lots of people do. That you should be able to participate and set our drug policy straight. Mm-hmm. Your job should be to have a sane drug policy, not to be muzzled and handcuffed.
Yeah. From again, my standpoint, I'm happy to engage in fuller conversation, is that has not handcuffed other offices and other federal agencies who are tasked with that work from investigating.
In 1971, Congress created a commission that was headed by Governor Schaefer of Pennsylvania to study federal marijuana policy. That commission came out in favor of decriminalization, but it wasn't put in place. That was 1971. Would you support a new commission to study federal marijuana policy?
So I haven't seen that legislation. I'd be happy to have further conversation.
Would you? It's a concept.
Again, I think we'd be happy to have a conversation in terms of what that might look like.
Thank you, sir. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Well, I thank the gentleman, and we will have additional questions. Some members weren't able to attend today, and we didn't get some responses from the witnesses that we would like to have for the record. So without objection, we'll leave the record open for a period of 2 weeks. We'll also be submitting to you, Mr. Botticelli.
So this will be very nice. That is Gil Kurlikowski's deputy, basically, who was stammering and hemming and hawing there on the testimony. It's just pretty amazing, like I said, to be living in a time when the stuff we were writing in blogs and on protest signs is now being used by our congressmen to debunk this drug war and to get the drug czar's deputy, the second in command, to say these things is just remarkable. We're going to talk more about this in hour 2 in our Toker Talk Radio. We'll also give you our trivia question where you can win this May 1975 High Times magazine, going all the way back to the archives there. And we'll talk more about this Representative Cohen and Representative Blumenauer against Deputy Drug Czar Botticelli. It was pretty amazing. I had to get the whole thing in on the Hour 1 podcast because it was just that good. That's all the time we got here for Hour 1. But again, stay tuned for Toker Talk Radio in Hour 2. And then coming up later tonight at 8 p.m. Pacific Time, we've got Red Eye's Reggae Flashback, an hour of the best deep reggae rhythm tracks. So check that out. At 5 o'clock, we've got another edition of Free Weed from Danny Danko at High Times Magazine. And speaking of High Times, I'll be down at the Cannabis Cup in San Bernardino, California this weekend, Saturday and Sunday. Check us out. We'll be on live starting at noon. I'm Radical Russ. Thanks for joining us. And until next time, take care of each other, tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.